Arguments for and against the existence of a god are varied and plentiful. It's like going down the aisle of a grocery store and seeing all the different flavors of sodas you could drink. Some are great, and some are Geneva violations. Seriously, if you see this thing, avoid it at all costs. But then there's that one soda that stands out as being a bit weird but unique. In this video, we're cracking that unique soda open and looking at the ontological argument by the philosopher Anselm of Canterbury. Anselm wrote a lot, but there's two big works that stand out, the Monologion and the Proslogion. The Monologion is a longer, systematic, and more metaphysical work that gives an argument for God, while the Proslogion is much shorter and only really argues for God in its early chapters, and then takes off to explore what this God is. Both are very dense, but if you want to find the ontological argument and read the, in my opinion, easier text, check out the Proslogion. And out of its 26 chapters, the famous ontological argument is actually just found in 3 of them. In chapter 1, Anselm goes over the headspace he's in and wants us to be in before contemplating God, because this is a pretty big deal with important consequences. Enter into the chamber of your mind, shut out everything but God and whatever helps you seek Him, and seek Him behind closed doors. This might seem like he's overhyping things, but the next 3 chapters are pretty dense and can get confusing, so it is a good idea to close out any distractions and really focus here. But after this, Anselm lets slip a certain bias. He admits that before any attempt to understand God, he proclaims that he believes in God. Maybe this leads to confirmation bias, what do you think? For I do not seek to understand in order to believe. I believe in order to understand, for I also believe that unless I believe, I shall not understand. Alright, so that was a lot of setup. Let's now get into the actual argument. He starts by asking, what would a god be? How would we define him? Or more likely, it. Anselm believes that we would all be in agreement that God is something that which nothing greater can be thought. So for those of you who don't believe in God, ask yourself, if a God exists, not saying he does or anything, but if a God exists, he would be something that which nothing greater can be thought. Whatever great thing you could think about in your imagination, like a Popeye's box combo or $30 billion, a God would be thought to be greater than these things, right? I think Anselm is safe to assume that even atheists would grant this mental understanding of God. So God exists in our imagination. As of now, he's simply a thought, a thing which nothing greater can be thought, an imaginative thing. Are we all on the same page so far? Or do some of you disagree already? Remember, you aren't saying God exists in reality. You're saying God can exist simply in your mind, as something which nothing greater can be thought. And there's a big difference between existing solely in imagination and existing in reality, right? Anselm uses the example of a painter. Before the painter paints, he thinks up in his mind what he's going to paint. This creation only exists in his mind. When he actually puts his painting on a canvas, this image now exists in reality and still exists in the painter's mind. For now though, God only exists in our mind as something than which nothing greater can be thought. But wait a minute, isn't it greater for something to exist in reality and the mind than simply just the mind? For our painter, isn't that mental image greater when it also exists in reality? Therefore, it's greater to exist in both the mind and reality than just the mind. But there's so many mental images we can think of that do exist in reality, like the video game Concord. That existed in the game developer's mind, and now it exists in reality, and is therefore greater than any thought existing just in the mind. But our idea of God right now is just in the mind. So is Concord greater than God? Apparently not. Let's return to our definition for God. So God must be the greatest thing that can be thought. But in order to truly be that greatest thought, it must also exist in reality, because existing in reality and the mind is greater than just existing in the mind. To quote Anselm, therefore, if that than which nothing greater can be thought not to exist, then that than which a greater cannot be thought is not that than which a greater can be thought. And this is a contradiction. So that than which a greater cannot be thought exists so truly that it cannot even be thought not to exist. If you read that and got confused, then you're not alone. Anselm must have gotten his writing advice from Hegel, but reread those quotes if you have to. I certainly did. Let me see if I could sum it up to make it clearer. God is something that which nothing greater can be thought. You can think this thing, therefore it exists in your mind. It is greater to exist in reality and mind than simply mind. Therefore, in order to truly be something than which nothing greater can be thought, God must also exist in reality. So that's the ontological argument. Before I move on and provide my own critique, pause the video and take this time to think up your own critique. This argument has been torn through and defended since its conception, so you might find yourself aligning with another. As for myself, I have a problem with the word greater. First of all, it isn't clearly defined, but even if we take a common sense definition of greater, why should we assume that it's greater to exist in reality and mind than simply mind? Let's use Anselm's example of the painter. In his head could be this beautiful goddess with no imperfections, but when he actualizes it in reality, it could turn out terribly. Actualizing something means to put it in the restraints of reality. It can't be as wildly creative as you had in your mind. But that's just my own critique. And that's the video. Comment below your own thoughts on the ontological argument, and be sure to subscribe, like, and share this video if you want to support the channel and get more philosophy content. And with that, I wish you all a beautiful rest of your day.